Daniel Morrison was known for his wealth, the heir to the Morrison Enterprises empire, but no one knew how deeply empty he felt, trapped by appearances. Every smile he received, every handshake, every glance, they all carried the shadow of doubt. Were people there for the man or the billionaire? He had lost his parents very young, inheriting a legacy as grand as it was lonely. The luxury of his world had become a golden cage, fueling his desperate search for something more, something real. And it was this very search that led him to a drastic decision. Supported only by Sarah Turner, his loyal assistant and confidant, Daniel planned to disappear. He would create a false identity, leave his riches behind, and immerse himself in a simple life as an ordinary man. A special place came to mind: Maplewood, a small town with quiet streets and unfamiliar faces. It was perfect for his secret plan. There, he would become Daniel Parker, a man of modest origins, seeking honest work and new connections. He rented a tiny apartment, bought an old car, humble items to fit his new story. Sarah tried to reason with him, her voice firm, her concern evident. "Do you really think you can hide who you are?" She asked this more than once, her eyes searching his. But Daniel was resolute. This was a test to rediscover his faith in humanity, to perhaps find someone who loved Daniel, the man, not the heir. The moment he settled in Maplewood, Daniel noticed how starkly different it was from the life he knew. People greeted each other on the streets with sincerity. Doors were left ajar, as if inviting connection. Interactions felt genuine, stripped of hidden motives. But adapting to his new life was far from easy. He had to learn how to be someone else. He worked hard to earn a living with manual labor and faced prejudices he had never encountered before. Each day brought tears and a lesson. The turning point came when he landed a job at a local restaurant owned by Margaret Jones. A kind but firm woman, Margaret tolerated no laziness. It was there that he met Rachel Carter, the sweet yet mysterious waitress. She worked tirelessly to support her younger sister, Lily. Rachel's beauty was simple, natural, but it wasn't what captivated Daniel. It was her aura of kindness and resilience. She carried the weight of the world on her shoulders and never complained. Intrigued, Daniel found himself wanting to know more about her. But he was also afraid to reveal his secret. Despite his modest appearance, Daniel couldn't fully hide the refined traces of his upbringing. It wasn't long before curiosity and suspicion started to grow among the townsfolk. Who was this stranger who behaved so differently? One neighbor remarked that his language and posture seemed better suited to a man accustomed to big city life, not a laborer. Margaret, ever observant, noticed his occasional slips, but respected his effort nonetheless. Amidst dishes washed and late-night conversations, Daniel uncovered a web of human stories in Maplewood. Unfulfilled dreams, unspoken sorrows, and acts of kindness that went beyond appearances. Rachel grew closer to him, unknowingly transforming Daniel in ways he never expected. Was he finally breaking free from his past? Only time would tell. In Maplewood, every autumn was marked by the town's most anticipated event, the Miss Maplewood Elegance Contest. The entire town seemed to revolve around this celebration of beauty, charm, and charisma. But this year there was something different. Beneath the bright lights, the elaborate dances, and the rehearsed smiles, an unexpected story was about to unfold. Daniel, still living under his assumed identity, found himself recruited by the town hall to help behind the scenes. At first, he hesitated. This kind of spectacle didn't fit into the simplicity he sought. But how could he refuse? If he was here to live an authentic life, this was part of the experience. His job was straightforward, handling logistics, preparing the stage, and assisting with setups. Yet in between these tasks, he caught snippets of conversations. Little moments of laughter, nerves, and excitement as the contestants prepared themselves. There were 27 participants that year, all from various parts of the county. Different ages, different dreams. Some were there in pursuit of fame, others driven by the promise of the cash prize, and a few were simply looking for a moment to shine. Among them was Evelyn Harper, a woman of undeniable beauty whose radiant charm commanded attention. Evelyn made no secret of her ambition. Winning wasn't just a title to her, it was a key to bigger opportunities. And then there was Rachel Carter. Convinced by her friends at the restaurant to join, Rachel entered hesitantly. Her colleagues insisted she needed this. She needed a break from the endless grind. "Show the world how amazing you are," they had told her. Rachel's humility and soft-spoken presence made her participation a surprise. Yet it was clear to Daniel and anyone watching closely that her heart was fully in it. What none of the contestants knew, however, was that among the stage crew, there was someone who was far from an ordinary helper. Daniel watched carefully, observed their excitement, their nerves, and their vulnerabilities. And yet, amidst all of it, he was wrestling with a dilemma. Was it right for him to build these connections while hiding the truth of who he really was? He found himself smiling more than he had in years, laughing quietly as he watched Rachel nervously rehearse her opening lines, stumbling over her words in her endearing way. The contest wasn't just glamorous, it was emotionally heavy. The whole town had its eyes on the stage. There were quiet acts of generosity too, people donating clothes and makeup to families who couldn't afford them. Stories of resilience surfaced, like Lily beaming with pride at seeing her sister step into the spotlight as a role model. Somehow, the contest became more than a beauty pageant. It had evolved into a collective reflection of Maplewood's hopes, its shared values, its dreams. Through it all, Daniel couldn't help but notice Rachel in a different light. While some contestants approached the event as a stepping stone to social climbing, Rachel was simply herself, vulnerable, open, genuine. He drew closer, careful not to overstep, caught between fascination and the growing risk of emotional entanglement. As the night of the competition drew nearer, Daniel realized, under those stage lights, the roles might very well be reversed, and this time, it wouldn't be Rachel who was laid bare. Daniel, disguised as an ordinary man, faced something he had never experienced before: hostility. Judging eyes, heavy with prejudice, the disdainful looks directed at his old car and simple clothes hit him with a weight he had never known. The crushing burden of being judged solely by appearance, working as an assistant behind the scenes of the contest, only exposed him further. Some co-workers mocked his supposed lack of experience. Others treated him as if he were invisible. Small acts of disrespect, so insignificant to most, felt like deep wounds to a man used to deference and respect. One day, as he was sorting through costume boxes, Daniel overheard two organizers whispering at the back of the room. "He's probably here spying on the event, some broke journalist trying to score a cheap story," one of them sneered, laughing. Daniel clenched his fists, his composure wavering, but he held back. The words stung, yet they reminded him why he had chosen this path. True love, genuine friendship, and real respect could only come when all pretense was stripped away. But not everyone there was cruel or indifferent. Rachel, ever perceptive, began to notice how others treated him. Through small gestures, she offered quiet encouragement or a helping hand. It wasn't pity that drove her, but empathy. And in those fleeting moments, a silent bond began to form between them. Though neither dared to admit it, at the end of another exhausting day, Daniel found himself alone in his small rented apartment. Sitting cross-legged on the floor with a plate of simple food in his hands, he reflected. For the first time, he felt the spark of true humility. Experiencing life on the other side of appearances was changing him in deep and unexpected ways. No longer surrounded by flattery or false kindness, he was alone with his humanity, and strangely, it felt like a relief. Among the contest's contestants, flashes of cameras and laughter echoing backstage, Beatrice Anderson quietly carved out her space. She wasn't a competitor. She didn't wear glamorous clothes or chase the spotlight. Beatrice was the event's young technical assistant, ensuring the chaos behind the curtains ran smoothly. With her hair always tied back in a rushed bun and simple outfits stained with paint and coffee, she passed unnoticed by most, except for those who took the time to truly see. Beatrice had her own dreams and struggles. She grew up in Maplewood, the daughter of factory workers who taught her the value of serving others. She had given up a college scholarship to care for her ailing mother, postponing her goals indefinitely. That decision gave her a unique perspective on life, teaching her, a person's worth is never defined by possessions or status. This lesson would come to life during the frenzy of the contest, when Beatrice crossed paths with Daniel. The scene couldn't have been more stark against the event's glamour. Daniel stood near the storage room, his clothes wrinkled, his gaze weary, struggling with the weight of boxes overflowing with accessories. It wasn't just physical strain on his face. There was emotional exhaustion too. When one of the boxes fell, scattering its contents across the floor, most people looked away or laughed under their breath, but not Beatrice. She approached calmly, setting aside her own unfinished to-do list. "Are you okay? You look like you could use a hand," she asked gently, her warm smile breaking through the tension as she bent to pick up the fallen items. Daniel stayed silent for a moment, caught off guard by her unexpected kindness. In this new life he had chosen, empathy was rare. He mumbled a quiet, "Thank you," hesitant to accept her help. But something about her gestures disarmed him. In the days that followed, Beatrice became a steady presence in Daniel's life. Whenever she found him carrying boxes or struggling with backstage chaos, she appeared, offering encouragement or small acts of care. A glass of water, a moment of rest. She noticed his difficulties but didn't pry. Beatrice understood some pain takes time to be shared. Her kindness was quiet, with no expectations or strings attached. To Daniel, the contrast was glaring. While most people around him focused only on appearances and competition, Beatrice worked behind the scenes, transforming the event's disarray into something manageable. In a world where superficiality dictated behavior, Beatrice stood as a beacon of authenticity, a refuge of sincerity and generosity. For Daniel, their interactions became unexpected lessons. He started to see the beauty in simple human gestures. Beatrice had no idea who he truly was, but she treated him as someone valuable, not for how he appeared, but for who he was inside. And without knowing it, she planted the seed of transformation in the heart of a disguised millionaire. As the spotlights glimmered over the Miss Maplewood Elegance pageant, the backstage atmosphere became as tense as it was thrilling. Daniel, still under his disguise as Daniel Parker, found himself witnessing the deep rivalries unfolding among the contestants. What had seemed like a harmless celebration of beauty and charm began revealing darker sides of the participants. With sidelong glances, veiled remarks disguised as jokes, and constant jostling to gain the judges' favor, the true personalities began to surface. Evelyn Harper, always glamorous and commanding with her magnetic presence, effortlessly stole the spotlight. Yet Daniel, rushing from one logistical task to another, overheard whispers from other contestants about Evelyn's manipulative tactics. Some claimed she had used personal information to weaken her rivals. Others simply resented her apparent dominance. Evelyn, however, countered any threat with a calculated smile, as if declaring that securing the crown was worth any cost. On the other hand, Rachel Carter stood out in a unique way. Reluctantly joining the contest after her friend's insistence, she refused to engage in schemes or undermine others. Instead, Rachel's generous spirit, especially toward younger, less experienced contestants, drew admiration and envy. Linda Parker even confronted her during a break, accusing Rachel of playing Miss Perfect to steal the limelight. Yet Rachel remained unwavering. Her quiet strength left Daniel increasingly captivated. But the competition wasn't all animosity. Sincere moments of camaraderie blossomed, especially during rehearsals or shared makeup sessions. These brief respites, however, were often overshadowed by the relentless pressure of competition. Each contestant carried stories of family debts, deferred dreams, and ambitions nurtured only by this singular chance. Behind the scenes, Daniel saw the pageant mirroring the town of Maplewood itself. While some celebrated the unity and community spirit, others used the event as an outlet for their frustrations. Parents fought for the best seats to cheer on their daughters, whispering harsh critiques of others. Even Margaret, the stern owner of the local restaurant, was caught sternly advising one of the contestants she mentored. Amid these explicit and subtle rivalries, Daniel came to a startling realization. The event was no longer just a part of his plan. Watching Rachel navigate the emotional whirlwind while staying true to herself stirred something within him. He couldn't help but wonder, could he actually be falling in love? But how could a man living a lie ever hope to build a love that was real? The climax of the rivalries came during a promotional activity before the public. Each contestant was tasked with delivering a brief speech, sharing a glimpse of their story and dreams. Evelyn impressed with powerful rhetoric, exuding ambition and a grand vision of success. Rachel, however, moved the audience with a heartfelt speech of gratitude to her younger sister and the local community. Tears welled in many eyes as Rachel spoke of her late mother's sacrifices, who had taught her never to give up. Daniel watched closely, knowing that the true test of character played out both on and off the stage. He realized the journey was far from over, both for the competition and his own precarious future. Daniel's car came to a stop in front of a small blue wooden house, surrounded by carefully tended flowers that exuded simplicity and charm. For him, this was an entirely unfamiliar world. Rachel, with her usual kindness, invited him in, holding the hand of a curious grace. As he crossed the doorway, Daniel was enveloped by the welcoming scent of a cake baking in the oven. The space was alive with stories, old photographs, worn-out books, and delicate embroideries hanging as quiet testaments of care and resilience. It was a home that pulsed with love in every detail, something he had never experienced. Rachel asked him to sit at the table, while Grace proudly displayed her notebook filled with drawings. The contrast between this meaningful, simple life and the hollow luxury he was used to filled Daniel with a mix of admiration and unease. For the first time, he began to understand that happiness could live in the smallest details, beyond the reach of wealth. In the middle of their conversation, Rachel shared the story of her late mother. She had kept the household afloat as a seamstress, all while battling a serious illness. Despite the hardships, she never stopped teaching her daughters to be grateful for what they had. Her voice carried a blend of longing and pride that stirred something deep within Daniel, forcing him to confront his own values. Meanwhile, Evelyn, still lurking backstage at the competition, started to suspect a connection between Daniel and Rachel. Using her network and sharp intuition, she began investigating what secrets the mysterious stage assistant might be hiding. Her instincts told her this man was no ordinary assistant. Determined to protect her interests, Evelyn decided to act before it was too late. Back at Rachel's house, The night took its most poignant turn when Grace pulled Daniel near the fireplace. With all the innocence of a child, she said, "I wish my dad could meet you. I think he'd like you." Those simple words hit Daniel like a tidal wave, leaving a lump in his throat. Unable to respond, he turned his gaze to Rachel, who avoided his eyes, silently revealing her own hidden pain. Rachel stood and, with a gentle gesture, changed the subject, offering Daniel a slice of cake. But for him, time seemed to stop in that moment. What had begun as a carefully crafted plan was morphing into something far greater, something beyond his control, or perhaps his worthiness. Daniel realized he had to tell Rachel the truth before his lies caused more harm. But how could he reveal his true identity without shattering the fragile trust they had begun to build? In that instant, seated in a modest home, surrounded by honesty and simplicity, Daniel felt closer to happiness than he ever had in his opulent offices or luxurious parties. He knew a decision had to be made, one that would change everything. Rachel continued to bring light into Daniel's life with simple yet profoundly heartfelt gestures. That morning, as sunlight streamed through the curtains of her small living room, she prepared breakfast with care and tenderness. Homemade bread, jam from fruits picked in her own garden, and a smile that carried the purity of someone offering their heart, without expecting anything in return. For Daniel, every detail was a revelation. He had never known anything this genuine in his world of luxury and superficiality. He watched her intently, trying to understand how someone could bring such comfort just by being present. But their growing closeness came with emotional complications. Although Rachel had no idea, he knew his secret stood as a barrier between them. Each time she shared her dreams or trusted him with her thoughts, Daniel felt the crushing weight of the falsehood he had built. The tension came to a head one day during a casual conversation when Rachel mentioned how much she valued honesty above all else. Her words, though innocent, cut through Daniel like a blade. "I've been let down by many people in my life," she said softly, "but I believe you're different." Daniel froze, unable to reply. He averted his gaze, hoping she wouldn't see the turmoil churning within him. Moments later, Rachel stepped away briefly. Grace approached, holding a small flower. With a bright smile, she offered it to Daniel. "This is for you. Mom says you have something special." He accepted the flower with a forced smile, though inside he felt like a fraud. Not only was he deceiving Rachel, but this little girl too, who looked at him as though he was someone noble. In the days that followed, Daniel tried to express his feelings through actions instead of words. He helped Rachel in the garden, taught Grace small games from his childhood, and began noticing life's simple joys, details he'd once overlooked. But even in those moments, tension lingered beneath the surface. His sincerity clashed with the invisible wall of his secret, a constant reminder of what he was hiding. Meanwhile, Evelyn, Daniel's ex-fiancée, inched closer to the truth. Determined to uncover why he had vanished and how he could leave everything they had built, she revisited meaningful places and questioned those in his inner circle. Her instincts led her closer and closer to a confrontation. And Rachel remained blissfully unaware of the storm looming on the horizon, one that could unravel her entire world. An emotional tempest was brewing in Daniel's life, a sign that nothing could stay hidden forever. He was trapped between two worlds, the one he longed to build with Rachel and Grace, and the one that was bound to crumble the moment his true identity was revealed. As Daniel adapted to the rhythms of simple life in Greenville, he began to understand more deeply what Rachel had explained about the sacrifices tied to the local pageant. Seated in the modest meeting room of the organization, he watched Rachel go through piles of paperwork, Her tired eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights and endless worries. It was there that Daniel started learning stories beyond the practiced smiles and glamorous dresses. He learned about Jenny, a young contestant with remarkable musical talent, fighting to stay in the competition. Her widowed mother poured all her savings into Jenny's dream, while Jenny played her guitar in the town square to help make ends meet. During a break, Jenny spoke to Daniel, unaware of who he truly was. "People think this is just about vanity," she said softly. "But for me, it's about opening doors, helping my mom have a better life." Her words weighed heavily on Daniel, filling him with guilt over his once shallow view of the pageant. Then there was Heather, another contestant, constantly targeted by cruel remarks and sabotage from more privileged rivals. Daniel noticed her silently crying after a meeting, trying to hide tears that betrayed her emotional struggles. Without hesitation, Rachel stepped in, offering a hand with her characteristic empathy, a small yet powerful gesture that spoke volumes. As the week unfolded, Daniel witnessed something else: the way favoritism and financial interests from sponsors tilted the scales. He overheard discreet conversations, one board member suggesting a contestant from an influential family receive more prominent advertising. This infuriated him. For the first time, Daniel began to realize that the true brilliance of these women lay not in their perfect appearances, but in their relentless fight for their dreams. Living alongside Rachel and watching her dedication to the pageant transformed Daniel day by day. He started helping in quiet ways, supporting contestants with small tasks, or simply listening to their stories with quiet solidarity. Still, the weight of his secret grew heavier. The more he saw the genuine effort and sacrifices of those around him, the more he understood how devastating his revelation could be, especially for Rachel. Meanwhile, Evelyn was closing in on Greenville, leading private investigations that slowly unraveled the careful disguise Daniel had built. An unexpected meeting between Evelyn and one of the contestants raised suspicions, threatening to unleash emotional chaos in the small community. The grand day of the competition's final had arrived, and the atmosphere in Greenville's community hall was charged with expectation and emotion. Lights sparkled on the stage as the contestants paraded one by one, showcasing their talents and sharing their stories of resilience. Backstage, Rachel orchestrated every detail with precision, though inside, she carried a storm of emotions that only she understood. Daniel, seated among the audience, disguised as the kind and unassuming Dave, felt the weight of his decision. For weeks, he had been transformed by the raw emotions and tireless efforts of these women. But now, the moment of truth had come. His identity could no longer remain hidden, especially when he looked at Rachel. Her strength and compassion had touched his heart more deeply than he ever thought possible. During the final performance, as the judges deliberated, Daniel unexpectedly stepped onto the stage. His first words were hesitant, but soon he captured everyone's attention. He revealed who he truly was: Daniel Parker, the millionaire whose companies had quietly sponsored the competition. The shock rippled through the room in murmurs of disbelief and awe. Jenny dropped the program she was holding. Heather froze. And Rachel, she stared, wide-eyed. With sincerity, Daniel explained his disguise. He wanted, he said, to experience life without the privileges money afforded him, to understand firsthand the challenges and the worth of human effort. His voice trembled as he confessed that Rachel had taught him more about empathy and humanity than anyone he had ever known. As his speech ended, Rachel felt her face burn with a mix of humiliation, anger, and pain. She admired his courage in revealing the truth, yet she couldn't shake the feeling of being deceived, used. The emotions were overwhelming, contradictory, because deep down there was also admiration, and something she hesitated to call love. A silence hung in the air until Jenny began to clap slowly. Others joined in, until the hall erupted in applause, recognizing Daniel's noble gesture and the significance of the competition. But Rachel slipped away quietly, unable to bear the storm of feelings consuming her. Daniel followed her outside, his voice gentle as he called after her, "Rachel, please, listen to me." She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You may have changed how everyone here sees you, Daniel, but you'll need to prove to me who you truly are." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Daniel to face the emptiness of a stage without applause just for him. The days following Daniel's revelation were filled with tension and uncertainty. Despite his grand speech about values and authenticity, his return to a life of luxury brought back old habits and dilemmas he thought he had overcome. Back at the helm of his companies, Daniel found himself immersed in a world of appearances where his public image carried more weight than the lessons he had learned while disguised as Dave. Meanwhile, with the contest's success, many participants joined social projects led by Rachel. Feeling remorseful for his actions, Daniel offered financial support. Yet the connection between him and Rachel seemed to deteriorate with each passing day. In an attempt to make amends, Daniel invited Rachel and the other contestants to a charity gala organized by his company. But his choice of honorees and the production team soon became a source of contention. During the planning, Daniel met Madison, a renowned model hired to be the face of the event. Initially drawn to her for professional reasons, her beauty and magnetic presence quickly captured his attention. His behavior didn't go unnoticed. To those around him, it seemed he was slipping back into the superficiality he claimed to have abandoned. From a distance, Rachel observed, disheartened. She began to feel that Daniel's transformation had been nothing more than an illusion. The breaking point came when Daniel announced that Madison would be the gala's keynote speaker. The decision outraged Rachel and many of the contestants. They believed he had chosen appearance and status over an authentic and inspiring message. Rachel confronted Daniel directly, her voice steady yet charged with emotion. "Have you really changed, Daniel? Or was your grand revelation just another act to manipulate us all?" In the crowded ballroom, under the weight of critical gazes, Daniel hesitated. He wasn't just torn between two worlds, he was grappling with the fear that, deep down, he was still a prisoner of his past superficialities. Rachel's words struck him deeply, exposing a truth he had been unwilling to face. His transformation was far from complete. In that moment, the weight of his choice fell heavy on him. He realized that prioritizing something fleeting over the people who had helped him grow was a mistake. His journey would be longer and harder than he had ever imagined. As Rachel walked away, her heart heavy, Daniel remained on the stage. The applause was gone. He was left to reflect on the fragility of his character and the urgent need to rediscover not only the true meaning of love, but also himself. The night of the charity event, marked by tension and questionable choices, left behind a trail of hurt. As the guests applauded mechanically to Madison's empty words on stage, Beatrice, ever observant and sharp, couldn't hold back her disappointment. At the end of the ceremony, she approached Daniel in a quiet corner of the hall. Her voice was low, yet charged with emotion. "You speak of values and authenticity, but you're still caught in the same trap as always," she began, her gaze steady and unyielding. "Choosing appearances is easy, Daniel. The real challenge is seeing beyond that, recognizing who truly matters, even if they don't shine like a jewel at first glance. Daniel tried to explain his actions, but his hesitant words only revealed his confusion. Beatrice didn't hold back, pointing out his contradictions and questioning the sincerity of his supposed transformation. For the first time, Daniel found himself without a response. The silence that followed was heavy. Her words lingered in his mind, like the toll of a bell, each note breaking down a layer of his defenses. Beatrice, visibly shaken but resolute, didn't retreat. Before leaving, she delivered one last remark. "Maybe it's time to decide who you really want to be, Daniel, not for the world, but for yourself." Left alone, Daniel wandered through the now empty hall. The echoes of Beatrice's words followed him like a persistent shadow. In the reflection of the grand mirror, he saw himself differently, not as the imposing millionaire everyone else knew, but as a flawed man, searching for redemption that felt further away with every misstep. He spent the rest of the night in his office, revisiting his choices and scribbling chaotic notes in his personal journal. It became clear that his idea of transformation had been shallow. Despite his eloquent gala speech, he now understood that real change required more than grand words or theatrical gestures. It demanded difficult decisions, often counterintuitive ones. As the first rays of dawn broke through the horizon, Daniel reached for his phone and dialed a familiar number. On the other end, Rachel's voice answered hesitant. "Rachel," he said, his tone carrying a sincerity she hadn't heard in a long time. "I need to talk to you. This time, not to impress, but to listen." The days following Daniel's conversation with Beatrice were ones of profound change. He began questioning not just his recent choices, but his entire way of life. The expensive clothes, the lavish dinners, the public appearances, they all felt hollow, devoid of meaning. He realized he needed to do something significant, not to prove his transformation to others, but to live in a way that aligned with the truth Beatrice had revealed to him. The decision came almost impulsively. He cancelled meetings, postponed critical deals, and chose to make a gesture that would truly show who he was becoming. That evening, without his usual tailored suit or symbolic tie, Daniel arrived at Beatrice's small restaurant. It was a simple place but full of life and meaning for her. Beatrice, busy organizing the day's community event, barely noticed him at first. But the murmurs of the patrons made her look up. She was startled to see Daniel, this time not as the untouchable millionaire. He wore a plain cotton shirt and jeans, holding a modest wooden box tied with a burlap ribbon. When their eyes met, Beatrice didn't hide her surprise. Her first instinct was distrust, but Daniel's genuine gaze disarmed her. He walked toward her with steady steps, the room quieting as everyone turned to watch. "Beatrice," he began, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "I've spent so much of my life trying to be someone for everyone else. I forgot to be someone for myself. I've sought approval in all the wrong places, ignoring the things that truly mattered. You showed me that, and I'm grateful in ways words can't express." He handed her the box. Inside was an old poetry book, something she had once mentioned in passing as deeply meaningful to her. After a long search, Daniel had found it. On one carefully marked page was a poem, a silent declaration of love. "This is just the beginning," he continued. "I want to learn how to be better, not just for you, but because you've shown me the person I should strive to be. If you'll let me, I want to walk this path with you, the way you deserve." The restaurant was silent. Beatrice, visibly moved, held the box with trembling hands. She took a few moments before responding, long enough for Daniel to fear the worst. "I've always valued the truth, Daniel. And today, for the first time, you've brought it here. That's something I can't ignore." The room erupted in applause as Beatrice reached for his hand. It was a simple gesture, but one that carried immeasurable depth. In that moment, all differences and pretenses seemed to fade away. Later that night, Beatrice took Daniel on a walk through her neighborhood, showing him the simplicity and authenticity of the life she cherished. The setting was unremarkable, but for Daniel it was the most beautiful place he had ever seen. They walked for hours, talking about dreams, hopes, and the things that truly mattered. In the end, it was an unexpected and transformative new beginning. Daniel didn't just find true love, he discovered a part of himself he hadn't known existed. And Beatrice, with her unwavering strength and authenticity, gained not a millionaire, but a man willing to rebuild himself by her side.